Good afternoon. Yeah, so we've on the 5G track, and it's been interesting discussions. What I've noticed is that we've talked about core and transmission, we've talked about spectrum, we've talked about provisioning, network slicing, and platforms. And all these things, yeah, need to be addressed from a 5G perspective. There are many trials going on all over the world, and commercial deployments, they're looking at late 2019, early 2020. More importantly, in Africa, with most of the countries, quite a fair number of countries already on 4G, the path to 5G has been set, right? And what's interesting about 5G is, and I know there's been talks around network slicing, is that being a fully software-defined network, the network can be sliced to cater for a number of future services. So when you start looking at autonomous IoT, massive IoT, high definition or ultra high definition content delivery, the networks, just the benefit 5G brings. More importantly, because of its spectral efficiency and its ability to carry a much more large amount of data, or deliver a large amount of data, it will cope with the growing demand for mobile broadband and high-speed connectivity. So while we're still at early stages, and the previous speakers spoke around some of the use cases that they've been developing in the laboratory, it's just a matter of timing. So I'm from a company called Dark Fiber Africa. Dark Fiber Africa is a wholesale open access network operator. So we deploy fiber networks in the metros because on long routes. But our core capability is delivering wholesale access fiber to mobile operators. We back all their base stations, service providers as well. And we offer managed access services as well, metro internet access services. In the group that we have, we own a company called Squidnet, which is a Sigfox operator. And we also own an FTTH company in the subsidiary, which is South African Digital Villages. So with those assets, our model also has to change in terms of how do we position our business to complement 5G rollout to our partners, and our partners being the mobile operators. So, like I mentioned, a lot of the topics addressed core network transmission, addressed planning, addressed services, platforms, SDN, NFV. A lot of the technical aspects, right? But one thing that we do know is that this network has to be rolled out. And if you read the stats, it's anywhere between 4 to 10 microcells to macro sites. So it's a significant number of small sites or small cells that have to be rolled out. Now this comes with a number of challenges, right? The first one being cost. So can you just imagine the cost of rolling out these new sites? I mean, sites have to be acquired, planned, provisioned with electricity, power, and maintenance. They have to be maintained. Provisional infrastructure so that you can house antenna and baseband equipment. These sites have to be backhauled because 5G delivers on bandwidth-hungry services. So backhaul needs to be there, and high-speed, high-capacity backhaul. So by default, fiber needs to be there. They need to be accessible, and when I say accessible, not just from a physical accessibility perspective, but accessible from a process perspective as well. You need to have the ability to access wayleaves, permissions, to high sites to build out these sites and roll them out rapidly. And like I mentioned, power is also a key requirement. And our view is that, urban street furniture, the infrastructure required to roll out the 5G radio access network, and even some of the edge networks, are also equally important in this consideration of 5G rollout. So from a DFA perspective, what I'd like to let you know is, or inform you is, how we are looking at leveraging existing infrastructure to make this 5G rollout smooth, quick, and leveraging current assets. Now, if you look at our footprint, we've got a footprint that goes across South Africa and the major metros, considering of a number of assets, ducts, fibers, aggregation nodes. An aggregation node is a POP, it's like a mini DC, high sites. So having all this infrastructure that we use to normally just provide infrastructure and connectivity, our view is that we can use these assets to enable operators to quickly and seamlessly roll out infrastructure, RAN equipment, and build a network when the time comes. You don't have to wait for spectrum to be awarded to do this, right? You can start, if you know what your planning is going to be looking like, you can start pre-provisioning your sites, and it's just once you have the spectrum, is roll out radio access network and link it back to your core network. So one of the things that we looked at was, hey, we've got manholes. So if you look at the bottom picture, the manhole antenna and the form factor next to it, what we did was we, through one of our partners, looked at how do we exploit or leverage our manhole infrastructure, because it's just a manhole with a manhole lid, right? But you come up with a solution with a partner where the manhole lid now houses an antenna. So you can actually house an antenna in the street where the manhole is located. And this provides immediate coverage, a small cell coverage into those areas. The advantage of that is that, hey, it's on the fiber network anyway, so that backup capacity is there already, and the infrastructure is there to do that. The other important thing is that, hey, we need power, right? But remember, all our fibers go back to the aggregation nodes. I know, like I mentioned, the POPs and these mini DCs. So we look at an innovative way of floating power cable to the ducting, to the manhole covers, to those manhole antennas. So now you've got power. 5G is also going to be supporting very mission-critical type services, right? Utility services, massive IoT, even autonomous at one stage. So it's important that the service assurance on the network needs to be impeccable, high availability and high service levels. What we've done in that case as well is through another partner and leveraging our IoT network, the Sigfox network that we've rolled out in South Africa. We've put in sensors in those manholes. So now the sensors monitor change of state in terms of temperature, water level, so are these things flooding, movement, tamper, intrusion detection, so is the vibration threshold beyond a certain level? Is light detection, has the manhole been opened? So what this does is build a very proactive way of managing the network infrastructure. And this enables us to proactively maintain this infrastructure, ensure that its uptime is much higher, and high levels of availability. So that's one of the innovative ways that we looked at looking at manholes as an example. The other idea that we looked at is, okay, so now that we've got a manhole or we've got this infrastructure, we may need a small cell on a high side. So we've taken the exact same form factor, but kind of split it, right? Because the baseband unit for the antenna will now sit in the manhole, and because we've got fiber infrastructure to that, we can just extend a short trench to a light pole or a mast or some other piece of infrastructure that's already existing. Could be even be a billboard. So that enables you now to house the antenna on the top while having the full infrastructure and utilities to manage and house the baseband unit in the manhole. So that's another form factor. And what this does is, firstly, it improves the time. If you consider that you need to apply for way leaves, across large areas, because now there's just a simple change from the manhole to the high side. The other thing is it significantly reduces cost. You don't need to erect new high sites. You can make use of existing street furniture to house the antenna. The other thing is, like I mentioned on the previous example, you've got all the benefits of proactive preventative maintenance and assurance supported by sensors on an IoT network. And this is fully integrated into your NOC environment, fully integrated into your NOC monitoring and maintenance team applications. So the other key thing around 5G is, and the previous spoke about it, was edge. Now, when you look at 5G, and 5G as an ecosystem, you're going to have to require, for most of the use cases, I mean IoT, think about that, think about autonomous vehicles. Anything that is time sensitive, you're going to have to require very low latency delivery of services in an area. So, for example, if you've got a use case that's built around autonomous vehicles, for example, and there's an incident that needs to be managed, that vehicle needs to be informed very quickly, through its integrated system, and you cannot afford to kind of take the traffic all the way from the vehicle right back through the core to the central DTC and back. The latency is just too much. So you're going to have to require a lot of the processing for most use cases to happen at the edge. Okay, cloud is great for big data processing and data warehousing, but when it comes to these time-sensitive applications, you need them to be much closer to the edge, very real-time processing. Even caching of data so that it can happen quickly as well, and it requires infrastructure. Now, what we've done from a DFA perspective, like I mentioned to you, over and above the way our network is built is that we've got a core network that extends to business areas, and we build aggregation nodes, right? And that's now on the DFA network. In suburbia, through our company SADV, they've also deployed a similar model, having core network and access network built in suburbia, and they have aggregation nodes as well. And this is where the OLTs are housed. And what we can do, or what we're plan on doing, is now making that infrastructure available to service providers, operators, to do the edge processing. So in the very same infrastructure that's existing, we can enable the edge capability that's going to be required, to complete the use cases that are delivered on IoT. So the sensors and the controllers will do the signaling, and the processing will happen at the edge, and the return part and workflow will be executed to that endpoint. Now, this also has a significant advantage because it reduces the time, cost, and effort to deploy infrastructure, make use of what's already readily available. And that's, in a way, one of the key benefits of open access, right? Because open access is carrier neutral. We make that infrastructure available to any operator or any service provider on a wholesale basis. By doing that, we reduce the duplication of infrastructure costs. We increase the speed and agility of operators to develop and deploy services. And we deliver, and by aggregating that volume, we deliver economies of scale, which gives operators that cost efficiency that they're looking at when rolling out these networks. And 5G is going to be a significant cost investment for mobile operators. We're aware of that, and this is how we want to intend making our network available, and any infrastructure and investments available to operators to smoothen out the 5G journey. So, having said that, in conclusion, 5G is upon us. I know many of you all are either in form of planning or consideration, trial, going forward. My intent was to communicate to you how, rather than doing and replicating infrastructure, take advantage or leverage, infrastructure that already exists. It's going to become harder to, like I mentioned, to get where lives. Environmental impact analysis is an issue as well. I've seen a lot of case studies, especially in the US, where even with those trials, residents are kind of like, hey, we kind of worried about new radio technologies, within our area, within our proximity. So leverage what's there, and together, as partners, we can make this happen. Thank you for your time.